Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tech Off the Radio or the Tech Guy's AM Court if you prefer. I am your host, Pete the Tech Guy, half fedora, Doctor Who scarf, a season 18 Doctor Who scarf for those of you from Nerdrotic who might be popping over to see us for the first time. We'll travel, and I am delighted to spend the next hour or so talking shop, talking several topics that you will hopefully enjoy. Just a reminder, you can find me every day at DatechGuyblog.com, DatechGuy blog.com, the Tech Guy blog on Twitter, the Tech Guy blog on YouTube, where you are obviously watching this, along with my magnificent 7 writers who are writing every single day, items of interest for everybody. And boy, there is just so much today. There is so much today to talk about that it is ridiculous, the amount of stuff we have to talk about today. And before we begin, I do want to mention, in fact, let me tweet out that we're starting right now. You'll pardon me for leaning over. I should really have a mic stand up over here, but I'm upstairs today because my son is rather ill. And he's downstairs, and I don't want the noise to bother him because, he's my son. I don't want him sick. I don't want to annoy him. You don't want to annoy somebody when they're sick. The worst thing to do is annoy people when they're sick. So we're going to tweet this out one more time. Try and grab a few more people. Let's see. We're going to tag Don Schumer. See if we can get a few people there. And tweet that out. Okay, let's hope that'll bring an extra eyeball or two. And an FYI for people today. I've done something that, frankly, I should have been doing since I started this podcast, but I actually was a little more prepared today. I'm going to be referencing several stories and some YouTube videos. And because I'm doing this live streaming, I don't really have, and I'm not using Facebook because I don't do Facebook. I don't like Facebook. I've never joined Facebook. I am never going to join Facebook. You are not going to be able to pay me to join Facebook. If you look in the chat at screen, which doesn't get a lot of play over here, which is pretty good because I'm a bit of a magpie mind. So if I saw the chat screen scrolling, I'd be looking chat screen. I've included the links to the 4 major pieces that I'm going to be discussing today. So if you ever want to reference what I'm talking about, the links are there in the live chat area, so you can check them out either during the show or after the show. You can still hear me talk, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on your opinion of what you hear. So anyways, let's get right on to topic number 1. And this is a topic you probably haven't heard of. And you would hear about it if you followed Patriot Tree or Robert Stacey McCain, who was one of the first that Twitter banned for daring to quote people in their own words, which is a terrible, terrible thing. And I want to talk about, and this is something kind of tragic, actually, and it's not really something to be made light of. But it's something that needs to be, it deserves more attention than it did. This week, there was a fellow by the name of Calvin Munerlyn. His last name is spelled Munerlyn. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. And he was murdered this week, which is a very sad thing for him and his family. Now, he was a guard at a dollar store in Flint, Michigan. And as you may or may not know, the governor of Michigan has been very adamant about certain things concerning the shutdown, about masks and the like. In fact, here in Massachusetts, they're very, very adamant about it as well. In fact, there's a $300 fine here in Massachusetts if you dare go out there without a mask and you're not social distancing. Now, there are loopholes you could probably use to avoid the fine and so forth. Well, he was at a dollar store. He was the guard at the dollar store, and his job was to make sure, people had their masks, to, show a little face and so forth. And I'm going to tweet out, you'll excuse me again, I'm going to tweet out something. Talking Calvin. I got to get the spelling. Unerlyn case. Live stream. Hold. Okay. So, anyways, he was a guard at the Flint, I think, dollars, and he confronted a couple of people. You show us your mask type of thing, of show us beneath your face, and he ended up shot. Now, I want to read you this entire piece. Now, last week, I mentioned DatechGuy's law of media outrage. And I should say this is really media/leftist outrage, because the media and the left are one and the same. They feed off of each other. They use each other as tools. And these laws, these 4 laws, which I mentioned last week, dictate how the media left will act in any circumstances. You read those 4 laws, the DatechGuy's laws of media outrage, which you can find at DatechGuyblog.com. You will know how the media will react in any situation. This week, we saw a story that applied to both sides of DatechGuy's 3rd law of media outrage. Now, the 3rd law of media outrage states, the mainstream media's elevation and continued classification of any story as nationally newsworthy, rather than of only local interest, is in direct correlation to said story's current ability to affirm any current Democrat liberal media meme's talking point, particularly on the subject of race and sexuality. Now, the story that applies here is the murder of Calvin Munerlyn. Now, he was, as I said, a guard at the dollar store in Flint, Michigan. He was shot to death when confronting a customer concerning wearing a face mask. Now, this would seemingly be a local story. I mean, it's a guard, dollar store, face mask. I mean, granted, it's a face mask, so it's a little bit of a coronavirus tag to get a little more attention, but that's pretty much a local story. But it was suddenly elevated as Stacey McCain reported. Quote, "This is another Trump-inspired murder," one Twitter user declared. "This is what rabid hosts on Fox and Trump have done," said another. "A direct result of Trump's cry to liberate Michigan," said another, as a torrent of Trump-hating messages spewed forth. So once Calvin was shot over checking masks, well, obviously, this is because of Donald Trump. And obviously, the left started to roar on Twitter, and it was not confined to people without a blue check. Fred Gutenberg, who has been a big activist concerning this stuff, tweeted out, "Real Donald Trump, remember, your crazy tweet to liberate Michigan, you and your incitement of your unstable base are responsible for this murder." Well, so you had a killing that was ready to be promoted as a national story by a Joe Biden supporting blue check. He was right on it. But then something happened. Now, you might notice that in the post I have up, the tweet is not the actual tweet, but the text of the tweet. And the reason why it's the text of the tweet is because of something that happened next. The story got covered more by the police, and the police put out a mugshot of the people wanted for the murder. And I'm going to put in the chat a link to the mugshot for those who want to see it. Now, I got to tell you, one should, as Stacey McCain wrote in his piece, one should not assume anything about a person. You never know about a person. I mean, these days we can't even define man and woman, according to our friends on the left. So you can't really presume that a person, just by their appearance, is or is not a Trump supporter. But I'm willing to bet that these 2 fellas in this picture were not wearing MAGA hats during their visit to the store. Now, this is from the ABC 12 story. Now, notice that this is, again, a local story, a local affiliate of ABC News. Quote, 3 people are charged with the murder of a Family Dollar store security guard in Flint, who were enforcing the store's policy regarding face masks. The two men remain at large while a woman has been arrested and is awaiting arraignment in the Genesee County Jail. The male suspects are 44-year-old Larry Edward Teague and 23-year-old Ramonia Bishop. That's a kind of a weird name to that. Well, it's Teague's wife and Bishop's mother, 45-year-old Shamil Teague, have been arrested. All three suspects are facing a charge of first-degree premeditated murder, which carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison with no chance of parole if they are convicted. Now, of course, this might not apply if they are in danger of the coronavirus. I mean, it's not like they were selling ice cream or opening salons or something and are someone really dangerous. Now, if only Mr. Munerlyn had been killed by the right kind of people, say Trump-supporting activists protesting the governor of Michigan, or maybe some of the people who protested the imprisonment of that salon owner, or maybe some of the people who protested in Massachusetts this week over the new face mask rules. Then the left would have made his name a household word in America, and sympathy would be pouring in from all across the country. But alas, he was not so. As predicted by DatechGuy's third law of media outrage, the story remains a local one. And those who once purported to care decided that Mr. Munerlyn's murder was not worth the time, outrage, or sympathy, unexpectedly, of course. In other words, what's it turned out that Mr. Munerlyn was not only not killed by people who were Trump supporters, apparently, and even worse, killed by people of color. This story was no longer newsworthy. It was a local story. Suddenly, the Twitter storm began. Suddenly, people who were outraged at his death didn't care anymore. Now, I'm very Catholic, and I'm one of those silly people who think that murder is bad no matter who does it, and murder is tragic no matter who gets killed. That's what pro-life is. And I feel very bad for him, and I feel very bad for his family. Now, in fairness, I would probably not know about this murder if it had not been for the left promoting it at the time. This would have been a local story in Flint. Wouldn't have been noticed by most people in the country. I wouldn't have known about it. Robert Stacey McCain wouldn't have known about it. And it was his initial writing that got me on to the story. But I feel bad for this man. I feel bad for this man's family. And it's outrageous that he was killed over this. But what's more outrageous is that people thought to use his murder as a political weapon and suddenly expressed sympathy for the man and his family, and then withdrew that sympathy as soon as it was determined that his murder wasn't worthwhile to them, wasn't useful to them. It did not advance their attempts to gain power over others. That's just evil. That's just evil and disgusting. And when I think about people like that, it is very hard to maintain Christian charity in a situation like that. And I think people should be sympathetic to this man and his family. I don't care who killed him. This man didn't deserve to get murdered. By definition, nobody deserves to get murdered, of course, because it's murder. But the idea that these activists were willing to play games with this guy's death and then were willing to throw him aside really stinks. And again, this is the difference. Once it became apparent that this was not something you could pin on the Trump administration or that you could use in an attack on him, it became a local story. And once it was a local story, nobody talked about it. Nobody cared. Well, I suggest we give a prayer to him and his family today. Care a little bit. Care in a way that the folks who wanted to use him as a club to beat the president didn't. That would be a very kind and proper thing to do. And that's topic number one. Now we're going to go to topic number two. And topic number two has changed slightly since the time I first tweeted out the podcast was coming. And topic number two changed slightly. I'm going to blame Ed Morrissey for that. Now I'm going to again jump into the Twitter. I'm putting down my microphone. I'm going to prop that up, and I'm going to promote that we're now talking the Ed Morrissey story. Again, we're going to try and draw a few extra eyeballs, because that is what this is all about. It's about drawing extra eyeballs and getting about $180 more a month to the tip jar. That's really all my goal is. My goals are very modest in life. I'm a great believer in modest goals. So we're going to now swing this over. Now talking Ed Morrissey's hot air piece. On the Joe Biden. I'll say this out loud so that there's something to listen to. Joe Biden, double standard on the Tech Guy off the radio stream. And I should probably put the link to the live stream podcast out there on that so people can jump in, which would make sense. It's about time I do something that makes sense. So let's tweet that out. Okay, so anyways, now as you know, we've talked about the Tara Reade case a lot already, but again, my pronunciations aren't what they could be. And we're going to be talking about it in two aspects of it today. But one of the things we talked about last week was how it's become a dilemma for the left. It's become his shooting someone on Fifth Avenue moment, or even raping someone on Fifth Avenue. We actually had a tweet on Twitchy where a woman declared Joe Biden could rape me on Fifth Avenue and I would still vote for him because of Donald Trump. Now, think about this for a second. Think about what people are saying. And it reminds me, for those of you who are old enough, about a famous feminist saying bluntly that I would get down on my presidential knee pads and service Bill Clinton for protecting abortion. I mean, we had people declaring this out loud, and this was where feminism first started to really crack. It was really, really something. Well, it's been the whole belief. Well, we've now reached the point where the narrative has become, yeah, I believe this woman, and yeah, Joe Biden might have done this, but actually, because there's been a big development over the last 24 hours concerning that case in terms of believing or not. But the funniest development is this piece, and this is by Ed Morrissey at Hot Air, or the old Captain Ed. For those of you old enough who've been in blogging long enough, used to run the old Captain's Quarters blog. He now is a regular at hotair.com. He has the Ed Morrissey show regularly. He's even guest hosted for Rush Limbaugh. And I know that there are more famous possible replacements for Rush, like Mark Stein comes to mind instantly. But I tell you, you want to replace Rush with somebody who has a good sense of humor, has a good presentation. When the time comes, my money would be on Ed Morrissey. Well, anyways, his piece is titled, Biden, I'll change Title IX sexual harassment assault rules back to forcing the accused to prove their innocence. And this is from Hot Air, May 7th, 2020. And of course, the link is in the live chat. At this point, you'd think Joe Biden would appreciate a little due process when it comes to claims of sexual assault. Biden himself has backed a long way from his previous Kavanaugh-era standard of believe all women, with Tara Reade a new take my word for it, it never happened standard, and expects everyone to fall in line. Shouldn't he appreciate then the work that Betsy DeVos has put into making sure due process applies to all Americans in similar circumstances? Quote, And I should point out that this quote is within Ed's piece, and this is from a CBS News piece that he's quoting. The U.S. Education Department finalized campus sexual assault rules that bolster the rights of the accused. Secretary Betsy DeVos announced on Wednesday. The new policy also reduces legal liabilities for schools and colleges and narrows the scope of cases schools will be required to investigate. DeVos's policy adds new measures intended to make sure students accused of sexual misconduct are judged fairly in campus disciplinary hearings. Students on both sides must be given equal access to evidence gathered in the school's investigation and be allowed to bring in an advisor, which can be a lawyer to the proceedings. Now, let's interrupt that for a second. For those of you not aware of what's been going on campuses, you might be thinking, wait a moment. People didn't have access to evidence against them? People were not allowed to bring in a lawyer or even an advisor when they were accused of sexual assault? I mean, that's 101, Democracy in America 101. If you were not aware that these were the rules, the Obama-era rules that had been pushed, then you probably don't have a young man at college, or you haven't been following this case. And you haven't been aware of the lawsuits that have come from it, from the accused who've decided, we're not going to take this stuff, and have sued and have started to win big judgments against colleges. Or as we say, push back twice as hard. In fact, in Stephen Cruz's morning brief at Pajamas Media, it's titled, Betsy DeVos brings back due process and liberals lose it. Quote, liberals are aghast. DeVos has brought fairness to a previously nightmarish situation. Rather than objectively assess the new rules, they're miffed that their least favorite cabinet member dared touch something that the Lightbringer instituted. But that in itself is funny, especially since these same liberals are all lining up behind Joe Biden. And for them to object to that is funny. For Joe Biden to object to it, that's over funny. Now back to the Ed Morrissey piece. Chief among the changes in a policy requiring colleges to allow students on both sides of a case to question one another during live campus hearings. The questioning would be done through representatives to avoid direct confrontation, but opponents have said it's a cruel policy that forces victims to relieve the trauma of sexual exposure. Imagine having to be able to confront your accuser is a cruel thing. These are basic American rights. You don't get much more basic than these rights that are suddenly terrifying to these. Now again, back to the Ed Morrissey piece. The previous Obama-era rules placed heavy financial incentives on colleges and universities to set up systems that shifted the burden of proof from the accuser to the accused. Barack Obama and Joe Biden both wanted to see results from Title IX complaints about harassment and assault from their own political benefit, putting that far above considerations of law and justice. Hundreds, if not thousands, of college students had their reputations ruined in kangaroo courts without any benefit of due process, or in many cases, even an ability to present evidence on their own behalf or question witnesses. It's a system more familiar to the witch trials in Salem than traditional American jurisprudence, and continues to generate all sorts of abuses and malicious conduct. And one other thing about this is that people could make these claims ex post facto. And this is one of the reasons why drinking on campus is a bad idea. Believe it or not, I've never been drunk. The closest I've come close twice in my life. Once on my wedding day, which was 32 years ago. Wow, that's a long time. 32 years. And I'm the low man in my family's total poll. My brother's been married 36. My father was married 40. And my oldest brother this year will be 50 years. The men are all keepers in my family, despite the weird hats and so forth. But I digress. It's amazing. You get drunk. Then here's some advice for young ladies. If you're on campus, don't get drunk. Don't go to a guy's room. Do not put yourself in a position where you or someone else whose natural defenses are down because of drugs or alcohol might do something that they regret. Don't put yourself in that position. As we say in the Catholic Church, avoid the approximate occasion of sin. That's good advice, and people get very insulted by that advice. Because women should be free to do what they want. Like that woman was free to go into the water and try and pet that crocodile. She got away, and instead of running out of the water, She's standing there still potting water. Well, I guess I'm not going to do that again. And then the crocodile grabs her and kills her, which is a tragedy. But that's a Darwin Award thing. But again, I'm digressing. Now, back to the Ed Morrissey's piece. Given Biden's present circumstances, you would think he would have a renewed appreciation for the traditional model. Instead, Biden reacted to Betsy DeVos's finalized rule by saying he'd bring back the prove your innocence or else standard he clearly doesn't want to apply to him. Quote, former President Biden said Wednesday that if he's elected president, he will reverse a rule by the education secretary. And this is from The Hill, by the way, .com. He will reverse a rule instituted by Secretary Betsy DeVos aimed at bolstering protections for students who are accused of sexual assault on university campuses. In a statement, Biden said the new rule was an attempt by the Trump administration to shame and silence survivors of sexual assault. It's wrong, Biden said, and we will put it back quickly at the end of January 2021 because as president, I'll be right where I've always been throughout my career, on the side of survivors who deserve to have their voices heard, their claims taken seriously, investigated, and their rights upheld. With his nose in their hair and his fingers in their crotch, although I've added that part. Due process is only for Democrats, I guess. Breathtakingly hypocritical, but that's par for the course for Biden. But it's not just him. The Democrats standing behind Biden in the Reddy allegation insist that Biden's denial is all that's necessary to dispense with Reddy's allegations. That wouldn't be sufficient. Even under Betsy DeVos's new Title IX parameters, under the Obama-Biden standard, it would be tantamount to a guilty plea. Will those Democrats like Elizabeth Warren and Gretchen Whitmer or Kamala Harris and others embrace DeVos's move back to due process to reconcile the defense of Biden? Don't hold your breath. Last night, Tucker Carlson followed up on his previous segment about Red's allegation, reminding viewers that he remains highly skeptical of her veracity, and for some good reasons, too. However, Tucker uses this as a springboard to make the obvious point that by Biden's Title IX standards, he should be tarred and feathered and run out of town on a rail. And maybe some of his defenders should, too, for that matter. And it gets worse for them. Again, I mentioned Pajamas Media. So I'm going to go to that. I haven't actually seen this piece because it literally went up just before the podcast started, so I did not get a chance to see it. So let's see exactly what Stephen Cruiser, who you should read Stephen Cruiser every day. If you don't read Stephen Cruiser, you're missing out. And I just tweets that I've made when I read this, because I couldn't believe it when I read it. I tweeted out, seriously? Joe Biden vows that if elected, he will again remove the presumption of innocence of college students accused of sexual assault. Presumably, he will retain this presumption for him vis-a-vis Tara Reddy. Amazing. And I would actually, that's probably not correct. It's probably not amazing because the left believes in, if the left didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all. And the fact that they are going absolutely nuts over this is something. And this is, again, Stephen Cruz's piece at the morning briefing at Pajamas Media. There's been one signing contrast throughout, and he's talking about the revolving door in Washington. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos has been a perpetual thorn in the sides of liberals since she was first confirmed in 2017, and it's always glorious to watch. DeVos is everything the awful liberal public education pimps hate, which is what makes her so likable. She's rich. She's a lifelong Republican. She's long been a champion of school choice, which makes their heads explode. The Democrats fought to keep her from being confirmed, and Vice President Pence had to cast the tie-breaking vote. Since taking office, DeVos has endured nonstop criticism, protests, and horrible press. See what's not to like. Her most important work has been addressing the insanity that has been visited upon young men on college campuses for the past couple of decades, most notable being an infamous incident, the Duke lacrosse case. She has been, and I'm not going to explain the Duke lacrosse case if you've not, just follow the link at pajamasmedia.com because it's too detailed. She has been working diligently to bring rules in order to a previously arbitrary system that gave almost no rights to the accused. And this is from the New York Times. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos on Wednesday issued final regulations on sexual misconduct in education, delivering colleges and schools firm new rules on how they must deal with one of the bigger issues. And again, I've already explained the rules that she's put in there. And this is DeVos. Our new title from her own tweet. Our new Title IX reg codifies into law sexual harassment as the discrimination is. Before now, it was only addressed through Dear Colleague letters. We owe students more than good intentions. We owe them accountability through the law. And that's another thing. Sexual assault is a crime. And if it's a crime, it should be treated as a crime. When you don't treat things like a crime, that's how you can get away with violating people's rights, both of the accused and the accuser. Liberals are aghast that she's brought fairness to a previously nightmarish situation. Rather than objectively assess the new rules, they're miffed that's their least favorite cabinet matter. They'd touch something that the Lightbringer thing instituted. Crazy Joe, the Wonder Reap, is about to undo DeVos's changes if American hits the toilet in election president. And he plays that the Biden quote that I just gave you about women's voices to be heard. That's an insane mischaracterization from an even more insane man. It's also doubly laughable given the fact that he and everyone who supports him are actively trying to shut up a woman who accused him of sexual misconduct. What DeVos has done should be universally praised. The lunatics on the left who are opposed to her would rather every young male have no rights whatsoever. They need to be kept away from, well, everything. Now, he also follows up, and this is the morning briefing, so there's a lot of stuff here. And he follows up, which happens to be my next topic. So I'm going to keep reading because this is rather convenient. Actually, before I continue reading, I'm going to take this link, throw it into chat. So if you want to read this piece, you'll be able to see it. This is the link to Pajamas Media. That's the Stephen Cruiser morning briefing, which happens every weekday morning at Pajamas Media. Basically, it's their rundown of the stories of the day. It's very much worth your time. It's very much worthwhile. Now I'm going to tweet out. I'm going to pause a second because I'm going to tweet out the this piece to try and again grab a few more people to listen and to watch. This PJ.com piece. Let's see. Stephen Cruiser. Oh, that's moving over there. Let me move that over. I hate when the computer does that. See, I actually do something that's a little bit inconvenient. I've left in my tweet deck, I've left my link up to Robert Stacey McCain's Twitter account because I refuse to remove it. I hate what's been done to him. So I leave it there as if it might ever come back. And what I do is because of that, every now and then I get user has been suspended all over my screen, which blocks it. But I don't care. Someday Stacey will be returned. And it will be a good thing when that day comes. So until then, as a protest, I leave it up. I know it's kind of a private protest. To segue to my okay, let's throw the link to the live stream on there again. And again, I'm trying to do two things at once. I do apologize for those watching who have to have me pause. Okay. So now then, anyways, let's get back to the Stephen Cruiser piece, the morning briefing. Because again, it happens to dovetail with what worry about who they will replace him with is the headline that immediately follows what I was just reading you. And this is something that a lot of you are going to disagree with me. And there's a link from watch Tara Reid call for Biden to drop out of the presidential race. And it's funny because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to steal Russia's pronunciation, said, well, she hasn't explicitly called for him to drop out. Well, now she has. And the Democrats could replace him with someone else. Remember, all those campaigns have been suspended. None of them have ended. They've all been suspended, which means that someone could unsuspend a campaign. But despite this, and despite this new revelation, and this new revelation is actually really big. And this is from Twitchy. Here's an exclusive. Let me put the link, the Twitchy link, into chat again so you can find the link. If you want to look at these stories again, I'm going to try and keep all these chats, these links in there so people can find them. Here's an exclusive from the San Luis Obispo Tribune that probably won't get any play in the mainstream media. It's certainly not proof that Biden sexually harassed Tara Reddy, but it does prove that Reddy's story has so much more corroboration than Christy Blasey Ford's, and yet every Democrat woman has asked has thrown Reddy and Me Too movement under the bus to provide cover for Biden. Exclusive. This is from Matt Fountain of that paper. Court documents from 1996 show that Reddy Alexandria told ex-husband about sexual assault in Joe Biden's Senate office. Story at the San Luis Obispo Tribune, San Paulo News.politics. It shows the tweet there. Matt Fountain reports a court document from 1996 shows that former Senate staff Tara Reddy told her ex-husband she was sexually harassed while working for Biden in 1993. The declaration, exclusively obtained by the Tribune in the San Luis Obispo, California, does not say Biden committed the harassment, nor does it mention Reed's more recent allegation of sexual assault. Reed's then husband, Theodore Dronan, wrote in the court declaration. Dronan at the time was contesting a restraining order. Real filed him against him. Now remember, this is the guy going to court against Tara Reddy. This is her ex-husband. He's fighting a restraining order against him. And he writes that Reddy told him about a problem she was having at work regarding sexual harassment in U.S. Senator Joe Biden's office. So it does mention sexual harassment, but it doesn't name Biden as the harasser, only that it happened in his office. Now, this is Matt Whitlock. There are significantly more concrete and direct than Christy Blasey Ford's therapist notes that a Democrats treated like a smoking gun in the Kavanaugh confirmation. Curious how these kinds of reports keep showing up after the New York Times did its supposedly thorough investigation. And let's not forget that David Axelrod insisted that he vetted Joe Biden thoroughly. And of course, this is more contemporary telling than this is, as pointed out by Wayward Winfried, Fred, who's another blue check guy. This is the sixth contemporaneous account to emerge. And and here's another tweet about this. The crazy amount of corroboration from Tara Reddy is why liberals went from calling her a liar to admitting they'll vote for Joe Biden anyways, even if he did it because Trump. And this is basically what has been coming up from this. And here's a great little checklist over here on the subject. Dr. Ford didn't know the location, didn't know the date or time, had no corroborating witnesses, and didn't file a police report. Tara Reddy knows the location, time, and date, filed a police report, and has 5 corroborating witnesses. But she's unbelievable, according to the left. Now, despite all of this, I say Joe Biden's not going to get replaced on the ticket. I say Joe Biden is not going anywhere. Because the Democrat dilemma is pretty much the same dilemma, and to illustrate this, it's the same dilemma that the New England Patriots had when Tom Brady left. Now, for those of you who do not follow football or are not from New England, and this is a big topic here in New England, it's still a big topic months after it happened. Tom Brady had stayed with the Patriots for 20 years, which is very unusual for a football player, brought 6 Super Bowl wins, 9 Super Bowl visits, objectively the greatest football player who ever played. And he was looking for an extension a couple of years ago. And basically, that's what he did. He took less money, got extension so they could use the money to build up the team. And rather than give him a bit of a raise, because he's been taking less money all these years, after winning the Super Bowl and getting the MVP and so forth, the Patriots offered him a set of incentives that was so out there that he couldn't make them and didn't. So Brady decided, all right, I want a 1-year deal. I want the ability to become a free agent, and I want you not to be able to franchise me. Patriots gave him the deal, had him for one more year. They won the division again, but didn't go far in the playoffs. I mean, it's really reached a ridiculous thing here in New England where winning the division is a bad season for you. But I digress again. So anyway, so Patriots go. Now, last year, during what turned out to be Brady's final year, Bill Belichick drafted a quarterback by the name of Jarrett Stidham. He actually released his backup, Hoyer, who ended up going to the Indianapolis Colts to back up another Bill Belichick quarterback, who had Jacoby Ellsbury, who had been on the Patriots roster. And so Stidham only threw 4 passes in the regular season. He played all the preseason games, threw 4 passes in the regular season. One of them was a pick 6. And as soon as Brady left, everyone started speculating, who are they going to sign? Who are they going to sign? And I'm going to read you this piece. I keep seeing poll after poll that Democrats are thinking of replacing Joe Biden on the ticket on the nomination. The entire argument reminds me of the great debate in the sports radio locally concerning the New England Patriots and second-year quarterback Jarrett Stidham. Stidham was drafted as last year as Tom Brady's quarterback replacement. And once Brady signed with Tampa Bay, there was speculation that New England would sign one of the available quarterbacks out there, either Cam Newton or James Winston, or even trade up in the hopes of getting a new quarterback this year. There was a lot of talk, actually, that the Patriots were going to trade up to try and get Tua Tagovailoa, and that Belichick was going to give mad draft picks to get him. But in the end, none of that happened. Patriots did not draft a quarterback during the draft. They have not signed any of the free agents out there, at least not yet. I got to fix something here. Let's see. That S shouldn't be there either. There we go. A little bit of editing while we're doing this. And the Patriots, did not sign anybody. He decided to stand pat. And remember, Tom Brady, when he was drafted, he didn't play his first year. He was the 4th quarterback. They kept him for a whole year on the roster in order to keep him because Belichick saw something special in him. Now, Belichick is supposedly the greatest coach of all time. And although a lot of people are dumping on him for letting Brady get away at this top point, I mean, you had him for 20 years. So he's decided he's going to stick with, Stidham. And those of the people who are criticizing him for not going out there and signing a big quarterback, and who are criticizing him for not drafting in there, and were saying, oh, they're going to tank with Stidham, and maybe they will. They signed Brady's old backup again, Hoyer, to back him up. But whether or not to replace him really comes down to one question. And that question is, quote, how much better would the Patriots be in 2020 with an expensive free agent who'd have to learn the system that Stidham has been training for in a year? Because the Patriots system is a complicated system. Tom Brady's had 20 years in it. It's one of the reasons why, in my opinion, one of the reasons and advantages he's had is that he's had the same system for 20 years. So while there's tweaks here and there, if you're playing the same system for 2 decades, it becomes second nature to you. If you're doing something repeatedly over and over for 20 years, it's second nature to you. And that amplifies your strengths. As his physical condition decreased because of age, playing in that system, give him strength. But now a new quarterback that you'd sign, you'd have to teach him the system. And there's no guarantee that he would be in it. So Belichick decided, I'm going to stick with him. But again, how much better would a different quarterback do? And the answer is not much better, if at all better. And that's really the Joe Biden question. We've seen person after person come out saying, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, or defending Joe Biden, or saying, well, we got to vote for him anyways because of Trump. And a lot of people are saying, well, why don't we just replace him on a ticket? We've got all these people. Remember, Joe Biden was trailing, and the media went all in on Biden, and the DNC went all in on Biden. James Carville went nuts on Biden, saying, we gotta get Biden. We can't have Bernie Sanders. I'll vote for Bernie Sanders if I have to, but we can't have Joe Biden out there. We have to have Joe Biden. We can't have Bernie Sanders. On and on. They went all in on this. And so they got Joe Biden, who apparently was not all that vetted, or he was vetted as much as Bill Clinton, as Harvey Weinstein, as Matt Lauer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now remember, even if they decided, we want to replace Joe, but we're going to have to replace Joe Biden, even if they came to that conclusion, and it would not be an unreasonable conclusion if they came to it. And I'm checking emails over here at the same time, if you're wondering why my head is turned the wrong way. There are plenty of reasons why it would be tough to get rid of Joe Biden. First of all, you're overturning a series of elections. I mean, there were primaries, and Biden was winning them. So people vote. Before all this coronavirus stuff hit, Biden was winning elections. And that means something. Secondly, Biden was not just winning elections. He was winning elections primarily due to the black vote, which is very, very important. Now, remember, before the virus thing hit, the black vote, you had black unemployment dropping like a rock. One of the reasons why I think that they're very happy to keep Americans shut down is because the last thing they want is Donald Trump campaigning on the lowest black unemployment. Because if Trump gets a couple of % of the black vote more, it's over. It's just over. So you're upsetting a vital Democrat bloc over here. Third thing, you've got a divided convention, and anything can happen at a divided convention. A lot of bad things could happen at a divided convention that the Democrats would not like. The less controversy, in fact, they may not even have a convention, but if they have any kind of convention, there'd be a division, there'd be thing, and although it'd be great TV, mind you, for the media, it would probably not be all that great for the Democrats. And finally, again, you risk getting an unvetted nominee, or worse in their mind, Bernie Sanders, because they think Bernie Sanders has the capacity of losing 40 states, and he does. And he's an unrepentant communist, which is pretty bad. Frankly, if I had to vote, if the choice was between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, I think I'd have to vote for Biden myself, because Sanders supports communist mass murderers. And he supported communist mass murderers when the Soviet Union still existed, which is, to me, there's no, as I've said many times, and I'll say it again and again and again, the only difference between communists and Nazis is that communists got better press. They're the same thing. But that's the dangers. Now, all of those are valid reasons for Democrats to stand pat, particularly when you see prominent Democratic women saying they thought Biden did it, but we'll vote for him anyway. So they figure, well, we're not going to lose these prominent Democrats. But here's the real question. Here's the Jared Stidham question, the Bill Belichick question. Will a replacement do any better in the fall? Remember, the primary duty of the Democrats, if you're the party, is to win elections. Now, again, that's a very dry thing to say, and it's an obvious thing to say, but their job is to try and win elections, not only on the federal level, mind you, but on the state and the local level. And the question is, does replacing Joe Biden give you a better chance to win the general election? And the answer to that question is no. It doesn't. It does not. And if it does not, then why go through it? Why go through the trouble? Why go through the risk? Why go through all of the trouble that pulling Biden off the ticket would make? In my honest opinion, a replacement's not going to do better than Biden. And if a replacement's not going to do better, and if it's not going to save seats on this congressional level or on the state and local level, then he stays. Why damage another Democrat by putting them in there and getting Biden out and angering some people? If you're not going to do better, why take the risks? Why not just lose with? It's sort of like what happened in 1984 with Martha Martindale. It was kind of his turn. They knew they were going to lose to Reagan. And so there was a contested primary. But yeah, they went around Mondale, and Mondale lost 49 states. the Democrats will lose just as badly with Biden as they will with anyone else. So they might as well stick with fast hands, Joe. At least that's where they are now. Now, things could get worse. I mean, you had the already interview with Megyn Kelly, who I'm sure now that the left, which loved Megyn Kelly because she's anti-Trump, will suddenly decide that, oh, well, now she will once again be considered a right-wing hack or a Trump stooge or whatever for doing it. And it's very funny because she interviewed her and said, would you undergo cross-examination? Would you take a lie detector test? She's over there. Listen, I'm not a criminal. I'll take a lie detector test if Joe Biden does. Now, frankly, I think Biden might pass a lie detector test because I don't think he's compos mentis. So he might pass one by default because if he says he doesn't remember, he may not actually remember. That's how bad it is with Biden. But seriously, if the Democrats do not think that they are going to do better with a different candidate, then they're not going to replace him. So I don't care how much talk there is about, oh, they're going to get Joe Biden off the ticket. Oh, we're going to do these things. Biden's going to be the nominee. Might actually take to the second ballot. Before all this came up, I was predicting Biden on the second ballot. And even when you have Joe Biden is basically saying, and this is the Ace of Spades headline. Biden didn't say this. Ace of Spades headline is Biden, believe all women except the lying whore who accused me. And this is about, again, this is the policy position of the Democrats on this stuff. And despite all of it, how much more can Biden hurt the Democrats than they're already hurt by this? The Democrats have already taken all the hits they're going to take from this, in my opinion. Their reputation is already shot. And anyone who's going to abandon them already has already done so. I mean, maybe if there's a third party, maybe if Justin Amish runs, people will vote that way to give themselves a reason to vote elsewhere, to assuage their conscience. But Biden's not going anywhere. And I mean, frankly, I think if he does shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, they'll keep him. I mean, if he says something against gay marriage, he's toast. But other than that, unless he suddenly reverses himself and decides to be a faithful Catholic, Joe Biden is going to be the nominee, and that's all there is to it. And now we're going to get to our final topic, which is completely off of every other topic. And we're going to talk about a video at a place called nerdrotic.com. Now talking and how Doctor Who R.I.P. became okay, let me throw the link out one more time. So this is we're now going to our final segment. Now, you know, those of you who aren't as familiar with me, and I'm presuming anyone who's watching this podcast is familiar with my work anyways. Some of you might wonder, why do I wear a Doctor Who scarf? Well, I was a huge Doctor Who fan. A huge Doctor Who fan for a very long time. I started watching the show. The show premiered when I was 6 months old. I started watching it. I caught it the first time I caught it was in 1975. I was channel surfing, and the way you channel surfed in 1975 was you were next to the TV with the dial and turning it. And I ended up on Channel 12 Providence. And they had this show with this guy with this 12-foot long scarf and this frizzy hair. And he was going back. He was in a time machine, and he was visiting. He had a cute girl with him, who turned out to be Sarah Jane Smith, and they were visiting Renaissance Italy. Now, and 12 years old, I was already a history buff, and so I'm into history. I'm Sicilian. They're going back in time, and they're going to Italy, so I'm hooked. So I watched that episode, and I think, gee, I'd like to watch this again sometime. And I think it was about a month later, I was channel surfing, and I ended up finding the very same episode, part 1 of that one. It turned out to be the Mask of Mandragora, the second to last Sarah Jane Smith story. And then I discovered Doctor Who on PBS. And that was it. I was watching. I couldn't wait to watch the next Doctor Who. In fact, when I went to college, my first day in college in 1981, they were giving out 2-liter bottles of Coke if you signed up for a credit card. And so I signed up for the credit card because I wanted a 2-liter bottle of Coke. And in fact, what's interesting is 2-liter bottles of Coke in those days was about $2. So soda has actually gone down if you consider inflation from the time when I was younger. And I remember I used that credit card, and I bought myself a VHS recorder. And in those days, a VHS recorder was $500, which was the equivalent of a semester of tuition at my college. And to give you an idea how cheap college was in those days too, but that was a big, big purchase for me. That was the biggest purchase of my life at the time, because I had a kind of a hand-me-down car. And so I started doing VHS. I'm sorry, I just saw a cartoon online that showed a bunch of cavemen around fire, and it says the first liberals, we really need to ban fire before someone gets hurt. That's just great. But anyway, so I started watching Doctor Who. I recorded them. I still have the VHS tapes, by the way. The first one I recorded was the 5 Doctors when it came out. They actually broadcast that one live, or at the same time as it played in England. And so I have like years of Doctor Who. I got into the Big Finish when the series came back. I remember watching Christopher Eccleston in the series when it came back. And the first time you heard the TARDIS, because they didn't show the TARDIS at first. They showed it deep in the background. They didn't show it dematerializing. He travels in what's called the TARDIS, which is a police box, which is what in the days before cell phones, you used to go in. The police would go into this box and call in, or you could hold a person in it and so forth. And supposedly his time machine had what was called the chameleon circuit, which allowed it to change shape, and it was busted. And he had stolen it, and he really didn't know how to use it. Well, it was a brilliant show. Tom Baker was brilliant. He's still brilliant. And then when Big Finish brought back, I've discovered Big Finish, which started making audios of Doctor Who back in 1990. I mean, I'm sorry, 1999. I started buying those. I still have a bunch of them downstairs. I might even have 1 or 2 bopping around. Actually, I have one. I think I have one right here. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Do I have one? I think I do. Let me reach over here. There's a pile of... these are the Big Finish audios. Here's a 5th Doctor one, the Contingency Club. It's one of the last ones I listened to. There's one of the 7th Doctor here. I actually haven't been listening to them in years, and I have a few that are unopened because when they brought back the series, I was very excited. And the series was great. Russell T Davies was writing very well. But he was also the writer for Queer to Folk. And he started throwing liberalism in there. And it was very subtle at first. And I've always theorized that one of the reasons that Eccleston left after season 1 was because he just saw that they were basically playing liberal games here and decided, I'm not here to push an agenda. I'm here to do a television show. Well, during the David Tennant years, it became more and more blatant, but Tennant was a very great Doctor. And then came Matt Smith and Stephen Moffat. Now, Moffat was very good. The best of Moffat was better than the best of Russell T Davies. But Russell T Davies was more consistently good. I mean, Moffat's best work is by far the best. Russell T Davies' work was consistent. If you average it out, Davies' work was better. But Moffat, his highs were much higher than Davies' highs. And when he brought in Matt Smith, I think Matt Smith was the closest to Tom Baker. I mean, until Matt Smith came around, when people mentioned the Doctor, Tom Baker came into my head. Then when and I'm going more into the geek stuff here because I figure there might be a few neurotic people watching. But when Matt Smith came in, he would come into my head as the Doctor because he was that good. Then they brought in Peter Capaldi, and this was a move, I think, because Moffat was really a third Doctor guy, and who was played by John Pertwee, who had a particular style. And Capaldi was not as good as Smith, but I think Smith was either the first or second best Doctor, so that's not a hit on Capaldi. Capaldi was very good. But they kept getting more and more woke. And one of the things they did was they turned the Doctor's arch enemy, the Master, into a woman. And I didn't like the idea of doing that, but a comedian by the name of Michelle Gomez played it. And it was so well written. And she was, I mean, you cannot adequately say how good Michelle Gomez was in that role. Michelle Gomez, I mean, Roger Delgado made the Master his role. Anthony Ainley made the Master his role. But Michelle Gomez as Missy. John Sim did a great Master too. Don't get me wrong there. She made it her role. She was. I cannot. You'd have to go back and watch some of the episodes. They are so good. Her performances, she and Capaldi played off each other perfectly. They were perfect together. They were absolutely perfect together. That was that good. And I remember when I was watching, not the last episode, the last 3 episodes they had with Peter Capaldi. There was the Christmas special, and there was a 2-parter before that. And the first part was so good. It was probably some of the best writing that Moffat ever did. And the second part was really good until at a point. And then he went all woke. And I'm like, oh, you didn't do that again, did you? And it was a disappointment. And then the last episode was a real disappointment because it was all about the first Doctor's this sexist, racist, old fossil that should have been ignored. Well, they were deciding whether or not who the new Doctor was going to be. And I wrote at the time a piece explaining why Doctor Who should not be a woman. And I don't know if I moved it over to the new site. Let me see if I can find the piece. I should have really brought it up at this, but I haven't actually touched on the neurotic stuff because I'm trying to give you the background. And I was writing basically that the series had problems when they tried to get woke before. And the reason why it was canceled the first time, because Doctor Who ran from 1963 to 1989. And the people in Doctor Who at the time, the writers, the 7th Doctor, talked about how they were trying to push an anti-Thatcher message. And I'm going to read you a little bit about that piece that I just mentioned here. It's called "How Left-Wing Hackery Killed Doctor Who in 1989," which again, history has a tendency of repeating itself if you don't learn from it, and history is repeating itself, unfortunately, when it comes to Doctor Who. And here's the quote from the story. Quote, "Sylvester McCoy, the actor who played Doctor Who for 2 years in the 1980s, has revealed that the left-wing scriptwriters hired by the BBC wrote propaganda into the plots as an attempt to undermine Margaret Thatcher's premiership. Quote, the idea of bringing politics into Doctor Who was deliberate, but we had to do it very quietly and certainly didn't shout about it," said McCoy. We were a group of politically motivated people, and it seemed the right thing to do. At the time, Doctor Who used satire to put political messages out there in the way that they used to do in places like Czechoslovakia. Our feeling was that Margaret Thatcher was far more terrifying than any monster the Doctor had encountered. Those who wanted to see the messages saw them, others, including one producer, didn't. And the Doctor wasn't alone in this belief. Sophie Aldred, who played Ace, the Doctor's feminist companion, said a shared contempt for right-wing ideology inspired a real bonding process for cast and crew. Thatcher was our prime minister, and we weren't happy. Well, of course they weren't. All you had people like Sakharov represented, not to mention the people shot trying to cross the wall. Thatcher had much to answer for. Oh, wait, that was East Germany and the Soviets, the people that Thatcher was opposing, wasn't it? Well, it didn't matter. After all, it wasn't as if a leftist tilt would kill a British institution that had existed for 26 years, would it? Oh, wait. However, ratings slumped from a high of 16 million when Tom Baker was the Doctor a decade earlier to 3 million, which coincidentally is where they are now. And the show was taken off the air twice, in 86, 87 by Michael Gray, then the director of programs, who said it had no redeeming features, and again in 1989, 2 years after he left. The joys of the left managing to make a British institution so unpalatable they could not survive. One interesting thing to note, if you see the same tilt in a few of the Seventh Doctor audios, such as the Fearmonger, I wonder if that'll come up in some commentaries. Well, that's what happened in 1989. Well, what ended up happening next was they decided that they had to have a woman doctor. It wasn't a question of, we're going to do this. We're going to write something clever with it. Nope. They decided we have to have a woman doctor. So they brought in Chris Chibnall, decided we have to have a woman doctor. And again, it wasn't about the plot. You could have done a woman doctor. You could have actually, frankly, what I would have done is I would have rewritten the story a little differently and had him regenerate into Michelle Gomez if you were going to do a woman doctor. And then have the doctor has the face of the master business, which could have made some interesting plots there if you really wanted to play that game. But what was really worse was that both Chibnall and I thought that this would not work pretty much because of the historical stories, because the doctor's constantly going back in time, and women were basically chattel for a long time, so the doctor would not be able to function as easily. Plus, the doctor's constantly imprisoned, constantly chained up, and you would have the specter of rape. And this is not going to work for a children's TV show. But it became more about, I have to drive the woke business. Well, I remember driving with my son. We were driving, I think we were going to a barbecue place in Sturbridge. And he had his phone because he was waiting, because I brought up my sons as big Doctor Who fans. And he said on the phone, well, they've made a doctor, the Doctor one. They've given the job to one of the stars of Broadchurch, which was a Stephen Chibnall bit, a very good drama, by the way, Broadchurch. They gave it to Jodie Whittaker, and it was like a switch went off in my head. Not interested anymore. Stopped buying the Big Finish. I stopped caring about the character, and a lot of young men did, because young men wanted a hero. And what I always found as interesting was they didn't give a damn that if they really wanted a strong woman character, why not develop a strong woman character? If women are that strong, then you don't have to take the boy's hero away. And as I commented at the time when I said I was done with Doctor Who, a lot of young boys might dream of being with a good-looking woman like Jodie Whittaker, a 35-year-old woman. But most young boys don't dream of being a 35-year-old woman. So Whittaker comes in, and the first episode garners fantastic ratings because, of course, everyone's curious. And they push it as how woke, and thinking, how dare anybody object? But the problem is the show became all about being woke. And I used to write reviews of the Doctor Who episodes as they came out, and I asked my readers, are you interested? And nobody was interested. I stopped watching. I didn't even bother to watch. My youngest son, who was into Doctor Who, watched the first 15 minutes of the episode, said, this is ridiculous. Shut it off. Never bothered watching again. My oldest son kept watching, and he thought the season was abysmal. There was a lot of rumors that they would replace Jodie Whittaker. And the second season came out, and it was abysmal. And the folks at Neurotic, now the guy who does Neurotic is a guy who used to own a comic book store. Like I used to own a comic book store years ago. I even had a small TARDIS I used to sit in. It was one of those canvas things with plastic thing over and so forth, and the place, because I would push Doctor Who stuff when I was there. I was always pushing Doctor Who with people, and I haven't pushed it to people in years. So that meant much more business. And a lot of people like me who encourage the fandom don't push it anymore. And there's been the ratings for Doctor Who, especially on places like Rotten Tomatoes. They've been, I mean, there've been spots when they've actually reached 0 for the season. It's been that bad. But it got worse. They decided that they were going to rewrite the history of Doctor Who, throw away the canon. And it was, well, the canon doesn't matter. Why are people so upset about that? If the canon didn't matter, you wouldn't be changing it. So they're trying to say, no, this is not the 12th Doctor. There were a bunch of doctors all before them, and the first Doctor was actually a woman. They rewrote everything. And for a lot of Doctor Who people, that was too far. And you started seeing the hashtag RIP Doctor Who, because people were just, I'm not taking this anymore. They've killed this series. Well, now you have the shutdown, because England has the shutdown too. And now you have things not being produced. And the BBC, I knew they wouldn't get rid of Jodie Whittaker after the first season, because it was for the same reason why the Democrats would not get rid of Barack Obama. You could not it didn't matter what the ratings actually said, because the media in England was still pushing this stuff. Because remember, the BBC is state media. They support themselves by a tax on, if you own a television in England, you have to pay a television license fee. And that's what pays for the BBC. That is what pays for the BBC. You are required to pay for this stuff. So it's amazing, amazing, amazing. But yeah, they weren't going to let it go for the second season. So now they said, we're renewing him for the third season. And now we have a different and now the Doctor has always been a woman and became a man only for that streak or so. But now there's no Doctor Who being filmed. No, nothing being filmed. And the base fans don't have an interest anymore. The products aren't selling. The merchandising isn't there. The people, HBO, which had invested in the Doctor Who franchise to get the old episodes, now people aren't bothering to watch it. People aren't bothering to buy. People don't care about the character, which is kind of sad, because it was an institution and I loved it as a kid. I mean, I looked forward to it. I spent money on it in the last several years. I've saved hundreds of dollars, maybe even thousands, of Doctor Who stuff I didn't buy, especially from Big Finish. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care enough about the character to care about buying it. Wasn't interested anymore. I have unopened episodes that I'd already ordered. Still haven't listened to them. Still didn't care. Well, the BBC decides that they are going to have watch parties, because, we can't do Doctor Who. So we're going to show some of the best loved episodes of the past, which I found funny, because I thought the one thing you do not want to do, if you're trying to promote Jodie Whittaker, the first female Doctor, as the folks at Nerdrotic mention every time that they say Jodie Whittaker's name, Jodie Whittaker, the first female Doctor played by Jodie Whittaker, is how he phrases it. Every single time it's mentioned. If you're going to push the first female Doctor played by Jodie Whittaker, the last thing you want to do is show good episodes from the series before the first female Doctor played by Jodie Whittaker was on it. Because then the contrast becomes striking. It's like when C.S. Lewis wrote about the difference between pain and pleasures is that they're real. And that if you have an actual toothache, that's much more worrisome than something else. And a great example of this happened to me yesterday. My son's had a very bad fever, and there was a fear of meningitis. And he got rushed to the doctors and so forth, because, meningitis can kill a person. And it looks like it's not that. Although they didn't do a spinal tap, they did the white cell count and so forth suggests that it's not the case, although he still has some of the symptoms. I'm still a little worried about it. But I tell you, when you think your son has meningitis or something, all the other little worries you have in life disappear, because you're worried if your son's going to be there the next day. Reality trumps all the little things that worry you. And in that same context, if you show a good episode of Doctor Who and a classic episode, that's going to cancel out. People see that and compare it to what's been out there and say, gee, why are we listening to this shoot? Well, you know what I'm talking about. Well, they also had this little chat with the writer of that episode, a fellow by the name of Paul Cornell, who's written some great Doctor Who things. But before the global live stream, Cordell did something very interesting. And the fellow at Nerdrotic wrote about this in his video, and I've already put the video out in the chat so you can see it. How they made it a point to block a bunch of Doctor Who fans who had criticized Doctor Who and the new direction it took before the stream, to make sure that they did not appear in the live stream. And what does it say about these guys that gonna block all these people? And that was before the live stream, the community watching, to keep them out. Well, the episode that they would show was called Human Nature, which is a great episode. Two-parter, the David Tennant era. It was actually written as a book back in the 1990s, I believe, as a Seventh Doctor episode, but it was put on television as a David Tennant episode. And basically, the Doctor is being pursued by these alien beings to try and take over and to live forever. However, they have a short lifespan, so he uses this device to convert himself into a human being. His companion, Martha Jones, who is a doctor, but a black woman, they hide themselves in 1913 at a boys' school. And he's one of the professors, and she becomes one of the workers there, who's basically his servant, because, of course, it's 1913. And forget about black doctors. You're not going to have black female doctors. And it's all about these aliens trying to sniff them out. And the aliens kill and take over the bodies of a man, because the aliens are a family, a father, a husband and wife, and a daughter and a son. They kill a man, take over his body. Kill a woman, take over his body, who's a friend of another maid, a friend of Martha Jones. Kill one of the students and take over his bodies, and kill a little girl and take over her body. So the father, mother, brother, and sister all kill somebody and take over their bodies, and eventually the Doctor wins. And there's this big conflict because the Doctor likes his life, and so it's a great episode. Well, Paul Cornell decides to write a little bit of an ending for it, an extra ending to it, because all four of the baddies, because the Doctor basically was trying to avoid this, because now once he stopped them, because they started to slaughter people to try and bring him out, he imprisons one with dwarf star change, dumps the mother into the event horizon, traps the daughter into every mirror that ever existed, and then converts the son into a scarecrow and leaves him as a scarecrow, because they were using scarecrows as animating them as shock troopers to kill people. And so all of a sudden, Cordell decides he is going to write a special ending, an epilogue, where the first female Doctor, played by Jodie Whittaker, decides to free the little girl because she has more empathy now. It's the first female Doctor. We're not going to punish these people. And this is where Doctor Who becomes Dr. Karen. And the reason why I'm called Dr. Karen, and I don't know why, and what occurs to me is this: it's not only are you playing with this, and he tweeted out at the time, the fellow from Neurotic, that Doctor Who became Dr. Karen. And I just could not believe it. I'm gonna retweet the video again right now. And what really catches me is, as again, I'm a Doctor Who fanatic, and I'm the type of person who I remember every episode that I've seen. I could recite most of them. And when the show was brought back, they brought a villain called the Stidham. And they basically would kill people, skin them, and put themselves inside them and wear it as a skin suit, as a disguise. But they were flatulent because they would compress, their bodies had to be compressed So it made it seem like they were constantly farting, which was an odd comedy. But it also meant that they tended to kill overweight people because they couldn't fit into small, regular-sized people. So, and they'd have a zipper on the back of their fat suit. And the doctor beats them. And then later on that season, in that first season when it came back, the doctor finds out that one of them had escaped, and she's plotting a nuclear power station over a time rift that's going to blow up. Captures her. And she asks to go out to dinner with a last request to go out to dinner before he takes her back to their planet, because they have the death penalty at her planet and they're going to boil her because it's a crime family. Basically, this they're not a race, they're a crime family. And she's begging for her life and saying, I spared this one, and the doctor talks about, oh yeah, you let this one go and so forth. But one of the things that Eccleston's doctor, the ninth doctor at the time, says to them at dinner, you're forgotten, because you're forgotten. He says to her, listen, you've forgotten. There used to be a real Margaret Blaine. You killed her, stripped her, and used the skin. You're pleading for mercy out of a dead woman's lips. And that's what really struck me and outraged me, because I remember when I watched that episode when it first came out, it very much the murder, and I know it's fantasy, and I know it shouldn't, but the murder of the child bothered me. Murder of children bothers you. And it should bother you, just instinctively. When you see if you see a child murdered, it bothers you. Even in fiction. It's just wrong. And I remember when they killed off the little girl. I mean, in terms of the plot, it made sense for them to do that. But it bothered me a lot. Well, the first female doctor, played by Jodie Whittaker, isn't off showing mercy to the father, who was off killing people and was part of killing the people at that school, and to try and draw him out. Was not to show mercy to the mother, who was, off killing people and killed Martha's friend and boasted about it. Didn't unscarecrow the son, who was off killing people and enjoying it. Because this one murdered a little girl and had the form of a little girl, I'm going to show mercy to this one, who's just as much as a killer as all the others. That is being Karen. That is, I'm going to play this game. That is the woke game. And that is really what the left is. The reality didn't matter. And the sad thing is, Cordell wrote the original story. And if he wants to support this stuff, if he wants to play with his own stuff, that's up to him. That's on him. He has the perfect right to do it. Just like we have the perfect right to call him out on it. And he basically blocked a bunch of people for doing it. And the fact that he blocked a bunch of people says so much about him. I mean, it just says so much about this whole process, that it's all about virtue signaling on their own part. It's why Doctor Who is where it is. It really is. And it's why it's dying. And if the show gets canceled, and this would be a great excuse to cancel it because they can't film things, I will shed a tear for the Tom Baker era. I will shed a little bit of a tear for the Matt Smith era, which I think was the best era of the new series. But I'm not going to feel sorry for these people, because they've all become Basil Fawlty. Basil Fawlty, John Cleese's brilliant character from Fawlty Towers, who ran a hotel, who said, this hotel would be great if it wasn't for the customers. It wasn't a question. He wanted the right customers. And if the hotel failed, so be it. But I want the right kind of customers. not the paying kind. That's what Doctor Who's become, and that's really what the left is. The left wants to vote out the electorate and get a new one. They want to vote out the economy and get a new one where people are serfs. And it's a disgrace. But you really should check out Nerdrotic. Of course, he's got 240,000 subscribers. I have 767, so I'm probably not going to add too much to his total from this. But check out the video. It's called Doctor Who Cancels Its Fans, R.I.P. Doctor Who. It's from a week ago. And it's a sad thing that what's happened, but it's an excellent example of what the left does. The left will want to destroy an institution, and it will attempt to take it over. And if it takes it over, it will kill it and skin it. And then if it dies, either way they're ahead because the institution is gone. If they take it over and keep it, then great, they have their thing. And if they don't, and it dies, then they're ahead of the game either way. But that's the situation, and it's a sad, sad thing. Well, we've gone very long. This is the longest podcast we've done. We've gone 90 minutes because I'm into Doctor Who, or I was into Doctor Who, and I haven't had a chance to talk about it for a while. I want to thank all of you who joined us. I want to remind people in chat that everything I talked about is in the links in the chat, so go ahead and check that out if you want the links. We will be back Monday, I should say, at 12:35 a.m., assuming I go to work on Sunday, depending on how my son is. I may or may not be into work. But until at 12:35 Monday, we'll be back. But until then, the Tech Guys AM Court is about to be adjourned. If you like what you saw, up arrow the video, consider subscribing or consider hitting the tip jar, because all of this is done to get an extra $180 a month. That's all my goal is. But thank you for your time. And until then, the Tech Guys AM Court is now adjourned.